Hey, science time. Today, it's the most wonderful time of the year. That's what I like to call this lesson, the most wonderful time of the year. It's a little sarcastic because I feel compelled for various reasons to give you a caveat for this kind of stuff. As we enter the season of Module D, which is about life science, I feel compelled to give you a little caveat. Today we are going to be talking about fossils, and so you can write that down. And the first thing we're going to talk about, though, before we begin, is that as we enter the most wonderful time of the year, the biological sciences, as I say, I feel compelled to share with you that people, as you're probably aware, have various opinions and disagreements about topics like this. Do you know, I'm speaking kind of in code, but you know what I'm talking about. Some people get offended if I use even the phrase millions of years ago, and some people get offended if I use the word creature to describe the little animals and stuff. And so I want to share with you that the things that I'm going to present to you are evidence-based. That means they're based on evidence, that a good scientist uses all of the evidence they can and makes a theory or a hypothesis about that. Okay, that's what a good scientist does. You have some kinds of evidence, and the book will present you some kinds of evidence, and I will present you some kinds of evidence, some of them which the law requires me to, and some of them that I find to be true, and some of them that the book claims, that it has claims and evidence of, and I will share those with you. And your job as a good and responsible scientist is to form a hypothesis, an opinion, a worldview based on all the evidence you can, okay? A responsible person forms a worldview based on all the evidence you can. That is, you don't just consume wholesale the opinions and beliefs of me, or your parents, or your pastor, or the book, or your college professor, right? That's not being responsible. To just take what someone says and be like, oh, that's mine too, check, right? You need to take all the evidence you can and jumble it up in your brain and form an opinion based on that. But you should also know that that's still just an opinion, right? We're going to be talking about Earth's past, and there is a truth. Something really did happen. I don't know for sure what it was. And if you're tricking yourself into thinking that you know for sure what it was, you are not doing a good job of being a responsible, I would say human being, but definitely scientist. Okay? So take all the evidence you can, keep an open mind, be a good, responsible scientist who takes all the evidence they can, and don't just listen to what I'm saying and be like, yep, I understand, or listen to what your mom and dad or pastor say. You're at an age, I would say, where you can make your own opinions about things, but recognize that they're just opinions. And what I'm going to share with you is evidence, but also some of my opinions, because I can't help it. When people talk, they share opinions. And the last thing I'll say is that if you are interested in my personal opinions about this, you can visit with me about it some other time outside of class, okay? Likewise, I want to make that very clear. I would be happy to talk to you about things like this, and I think you know what I'm talking about, outside of class and outside of school, okay? Likewise, I want you to keep your opinions about this. You can ask them as questions, but if you want to just make claims, they need to be supported by evidence, or they need to be shared outside of class. Do we kind of have an agreement? I mean, I'm speaking, but do you feel like you can fit within the confines of those parameters? Do you have questions about it right now? Is anyone, like, what is he talking about? Because I'm kind of speaking in code because I don't want to, like, call out the elephant in the room and be like, blah, blah, blah. You know, I don't want to just say it. But do you have questions about what I'm talking about, or can we move on to talk about fossils as presented by the textbook? Yes? Cells? Fossils. Okay, so I feel like I have done my duty of the caveat. The word caveat means like a warning label. I feel like I've properly applied the warning label of not everyone agrees about this, but I'm going to present the evidence as one, required by law, and two, the book presents. Okay? Thumbs up. Do the thumbs up. I wish you had been here for that, Miss Pryor, because I had to give them the speech, and I want to know if I did a good job, and I can't really trust them to tell me, but I'll ask Tiana later. Okay. Thanks, Ada. Let me make sure. I had a note of things to say, so let me make sure that I said all the stuff I want to say. can't read some of my handwriting. I like to give that little talk while we're talking about fossils because it's not that it's not that there aren't different ideas about fossils, but generally people find fossils to be a pretty safe topic to get their toes wet into the waters of Earth's history, as evidence suggests, and as the book and the state of Nebraska proclaim to be the way it should be presented. And so let's talk about fossils. Can you guess what question I'm going to ask? And I'm going to draw this little arrow, and can you guess what question I'm going to ask you as part of our discussion? What is a fossil? What is a fossil? Let's define fossil. Okay, so let's start with that. Let's start with dead creature. Okay, hold on a second, because we have a totally different thing. I'm putting these in quotes because they may or may not be the whole truth. Decomposed animal. Okay, and I will say there are problems with both of these definitions, but we are getting to a better definition. And so give me some more. We'll just kind of make a little word bubble of them, and we'll get to what is I would say the correct definition. But again, a lot of this is opinion based. Kylie. Remains of, you say past animals? Plants and animals. Okay. Else? Chloe. Okay, I think that's getting a little bit closer to hitting the nail on the head. This little symbol is ditto. I mean, I'm trying to write it like this: capital D, little O, ditto. You know what ditto means? Have you ever seen ditto before with the quotes? It means as above, ditto, right? I just did it kind of fast. Any other ideas about what a good... Oh, I wouldn't say any of these is a good definition of a fossil, but does anyone else have any ideas of what the fossil might be defined as? Hey, that's the worst one out of all, but I'm going to write it down. Dinosaur. Old. Okay, don't say old. That's really important, actually. That not everything that's old. Amelia is like, how come hers is okay? It's not. Not everything that's old, your great-grandma is not a fossil. Although, colloquially, we do use the word fossil to mean something that's just, like, not only ancient but outdated, which she very well may be. I love my great-grandmas are dead. I love my grandma, my son's great-grandma, but she is not only old but also outdated. I mean, she has outdated ideas about things, and when I say outdated, like, maybe they're not bad ideas, they're just what's the word? Old-fashioned, yeah. She was talking, I guess this is kind of related, so I'll just share it even though this is going out on YouTube. My son showed her a little spaceship that he had got that was a Hot Wheels spaceship, and she said, my grandma, who is his great-grandma, is like 90 years, I think she is exactly 90 years old, and she said, when I was a girl, I did not have toys like that. And I thought, what kind of toys did you have? Like a hoop and stick, dirt stick? I think she was also poor, Teague, so thanks for pointing that out. So let's pick parts of this. I'm going to underline and read some things that are good. Do you think that, let me underline some things that I think are good. Creature, I like that. Remains of, I like that. Preservation of, and old. I like those. Dinosaur is okay. Let me tell you why I like dinosaur. Because the only evidence we have of the non-avian dinosaurs, that is dinosaurs that didn't eventually become birds, the only evidence we have of non-avian dinosaurs is their fossils. So I kind of like that one, but that's not a good definition. That's more like an example. So the reason I did not underline, I like creature better than animals or plants and animals. Why? Guess. It's broader, yeah. So I'm going to use the word, creature is fine, I'm going to use the word organisms. It's an organism, okay? And I like remains or preservations of. I'm going to put evidence of, right? Preservations of. Evidence of remains of organisms. And then old, we generally agree greater than 10,000 years old. So 10,000 years old, or we sometimes say I'm going to put 10 kilo on them. And this is a little segue into, oh, I should have written the word years. Writ is not a word, years. This is a segue into this little side note box here. I'm going to do it in a different color. These are some I guess just abbreviations. They're not really units as such, but these are some abbreviations that we're going to use throughout this unit. In fact, throughout this module. And they are lowercase k, capital A is a kilo onum. The word or the root word onum here, A-N-N-U-M, is related to the Latin word annus, which means year. So kilo onum means what? Can you guess?
Years.
Okay, K years. What's a K? 1,000 years. Okay, that's a kilo onum. The other ones that we use are capital M, capital A, which is mega onum. Can you guess what that would stand for?
10,000.
Bigger.
Million.
1 million years. It's the same as like megabytes are 1,000,000-ish bytes, or a megameter is 1,000,000 kilometers. And then the last one that we use a lot is capital G, capital A, which is giga onum. Which, can you guess what that one is?
A billion.
Billion, not 100 billion. Don't get crazy. It's just a regular billion years. So onum means years. Kilo means thousand, so kilo onum is 1,000 years. Mega means million, so mega onum is 1,000,000 years. And giga means billion, so giga onum means 1,000,000,000 years. So we'll use these throughout Module D. As I say, they're more like abbreviations than actual units, but they kind of have the prefixes of units, and so we might sometimes call them a unit. So we generally agree that fossils have to be greater than 10,000 years old. Generally. Why do you think that's important? Why do you think it's important that we recognize that they're of this age before we call them a fossil? Let me answer that question, even though I asked it of you. Let me answer this question. I love this analogy. I use it every year, and if you watch any of the other videos I've made of this topic, you will, in earth science or 8th grade science, you'll see that I have made this lots of times. But imagine there's a little coyote out there. Look outside. Do you see this coyote? So you see a little coyote. He's coming out from those juniper trees over there. Running. This is in your mind's eye. He's not actually doing it, but do look out there as if you were. That's the sound of a coyote running. POV, you're a coyote on the football field. He's getting by the flag. Teague takes out his 30-06 and blasts him right out the science room window, and he dies, as something shot by a 30-06 does, right? The remains of organisms greater than 10,000 years, that's going to be definitely dead. So Teague has killed a coyote. It's on the football field, and in real life, probably Teague would be in jail. And you can't bring a gun. You can't bring a gun to school.
They don't have to know.
They don't have to. Who's going to know? Who's going to know if you fire a 30-06 out of the science room window? In real life, though, Jason or someone would probably remove the remains, right? But let's pretend that doesn't happen. Let's pretend like the dead coyote carcass just sits there halfway between the scoreboard and the field goal posts.
On the sidewalk.
It just sits there on the sidewalk, we'll say. What do you think it will look like in a week? No, don't speak. Don't speak. Don't speak. Just think. Just think in your head. What do you think it'll look like in a week? Now, don't speak as I've just asked you to do. It will still be dead. I will grant you that. What about, now think about it. Think about after a month, what would it look like? Okay? No. This is thinking. Stop saying your thoughts, okay? Keep your thoughts inside of your brain. And now think about, what would it look like after a year? And now this one, I want you to raise your hand and answer. What do you think it would look like after 1 year? Raise your hand if you think you have. Trey, what do you think it would look like after a year?
I think it would look like bones.
Okay, if it is there at all, it will look like bones. Now, I would say it's more likely, maybe 50-50, but slightly more likely that we would see absolutely nothing, because bones get decayed too. We're not burying it. It's just sitting there on the sidewalk. What do you think might remove those bones?
Me, because I'm going to go skinny.
Jason or T. And those do count, right? Humans are biological organisms, and so the activity of humans do count for things like this. But let's say no human beings interact with it, just for the sake of the argument. I think that it may even be possible that the bones aren't there, because there's a lot of woodland creatures. Yes, bacteria rot bone. A lot of things, you don't realize this, and it's kind of gothic and spooky, but things like beavers or squirrels or deer even will eat bones because they need calcium in their diet. Cows will eat dead cow bones. Ada, I am so glad you said that. That is such a great example of this. That other, please be silent, other organisms will even eat the bones. I would say it's 50-50 after even a year if there's even bones left. What about now? We're not, you have a question, Trey, or are you going to say something? Okay.
I have like dead animals that have been sitting out for like 3 years.
Yep, exactly. This is one time I brought this up, and I'm right, but I brought this up, and Cash's big sister Dally said we have a dead pit where there's like that. My whole life there have been cows, and even those. How old are you? If you're over 20, raise your hand. No. But even if you were, do you think all of the organisms that have died within your lifetime are in there? And maybe they are. But what about after 100 years? Probably not. The chances are really dwindling. What about after 1,000 years? Almost certainly not. And then, so that's why we consider this to be the age of fossilization. Basically, listen, this is something you should probably write down. Without some kind of special preservation, there would be nothing left at 10,000 years. Without special preservation, there would be nothing left greater than 10,000 years. Recorded human history, the oldest record of human beings is something like 5,000 years old. Something around like Sumeria and Egypt and parts of Turkey, there is evidence of human civilization that are about that old. And this is twice that long. So this is longer than all of human history. And we can reliably, within 10,000 years, we can use carbon-14 dating to reliably date human artifacts and some really, 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 really young fossils. But after 50,000 years old, carbon-14 dating is basically useless. And we'll talk about how we date things if that doesn't work in a second. But for now, what does it mean by special preservation? So can things, I would say, I hope you all agree with me that after even 1,000, but certainly 10,000 years, most organisms when they die would probably have nothing left. It would be dust. If anything, it would be dust. So how can there be any fossils that are that old? What would these special preservation methods look like? Yeah, okay, so let's list them. These should be from your lab. So, yeah, those 7 that we did. So that's why your bell work was using your lab as an example. Explain what fossils are. That's what we've done so far. And how they form. Your book lists 7 methods. This is not dogma. This is not the 7 Ten Commandments, right? These are not set in stone, the things that have to be fossils. There are combinations and et cetera, et cetera. But what are the 7 ones your book lists? Let's just start with that. Give me a 1. Okay, mold. I think your book lists mold and cast together. Mold and cast, okay? We'll talk about these individually. But let's just list them for now, okay?
Amber fossil.
Does it say that? Yep, amber fossil. I don't like that it says that, but okay. It's not your fault. Next, Leah. Trace, I really don't like that it says that, but we're just listing the ones from the book. Ada. That one I really do like, permineralization. That one we're going to talk about specifically. I'm glad this arrow points right at that one. What are some others? I mean, I have it here in front of me, but I want you to say it. Does anyone even have their little... Okay, tar pit. We already got custom multi. Tar pit. Okay, what else? Frozen. What else? One more. Can someone make the Frozen 2 sound of the siren? I used to have that as my text message. You know, on Frozen 2, the little sirens make the noise. What is the sound? Yeah. I don't think that's... Come on, there's one. Okay, there's one more. You guys are trying so hard to... You don't even have... No, not one person. I'll just write it down. Carbonization.
Yeah.
You do not have to have these memorized for no other reason that I don't really agree with this list, because it kind of conflates 2 different ways of categorizing fossils. But this we'll talk about. Okay, I would add to this list. First of all, I would remove from this list trace fossil for sure. And I would remove amber. And I would remove frozen. You shouldn't be crossing these out, but you should start a new list. And I would remove tar pit. And I would add what number should I make this even? I guess 8. I would add original hard parts. I was really actually about to write OG, but I thought that was a little too... Original soft parts. So we have original hard parts and original soft parts. I think that'll be okay. I would call this list 1, 4, 7, 8, 9 an actual list of fossil preservation methods, the ways they are preserved, and we'll talk about trace fossils in a second. But for now, I would call this list. I'm going to renumber them: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as my list of actual. The green ones are including that one. This is getting a little bit chaotic, but I would call this green one the methods of fossil preservation. Now I'm going to review. I'm asking a review question of you. Does everything that dies become a fossil? No. Approximately, guess this. Approximately, what percentage would you say of dead things eventually become a fossil?
5%.
Less.
1.1.
I think it's between 0.1 and 1. Maybe even less, depending on the environment. Sometimes it's almost all in some environments. In some environments, it's almost none. But on average, probably between 0.1 and 1%. So 1 in every 100 to 1 in every 1,000. And this is old. We talked about this is a long time. But even this is only, it's a sliver of the fraction of Earth's history. And so, do you think fossils, even if something fossilizes, does that fossil stay around for 300 million years? Not usually. Not rarely ever. That's why, have you heard, raise your hand if you've heard of Tyrannosaurus Rex. There are about, I could be wrong about this, but I think there's about between 20 and 50 Tyrannosaurus Rex's fossils that have ever been found. That's not very many. That's really not very many. Presumably there were more than that when they were alive. That's not very many fossils because over time most of them have decayed to nothingness, even the fossils. So these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are the methods of fossil preservation. Let's talk about those. Mold and cast. You made some of these in the lab. Will someone go get theirs, please, if they have a really good one? I'd like to see someone's mold in class to show the camera. Go. I wanted you not to throw them away. Let's move on to the next one until someone can bring me that. Will someone please define permineralization? I told you about this in the lab, but I'm gonna draw a little picture. You guys are talking too much. I want you to talk, but this is a discussion. But I want you to talk about the thing I'm talking about, and not while I'm talking. Permineralization is what happens when what? Someone define it for me, and then we'll draw a little picture. Amelia? Petrified was a good example. That's not a definition, but it's a good example. Chloe?
It's like when sediment builds up over time. It's just like it has to be specific conditions and like.
Yeah, it has to be buried. Yeah. Sediment covers it over time. You say. What else, Isaiah? Yes. The other book that I teach out of in this topic sometimes calls this one, I'm going to put in parentheses, mineral replacement. And I like that name a little bit better. Your book calls it, and most scientists call it permineralization or petrification. Like Amelia says, petrified wood, same thing. But one book calls it mineral replacement, which I like a lot better because that describes what's going on. So you start out with a bone, right? That's a bone. I've drawn a very good, thank you. Thank you. This is actually really cool. Do you have the cast that was formed from this?
Oh, yes.
Okay, I would like to see that too. This is really, I'm surprised by what that felt like, and I am disturbed. But so here is a bone, and a bone, like all of your tissues, some of you have bigger pores than others, but like all of your tissues have pores in them. Okay, so just right at, and if the organism is buried in a matrix of some mineral, if the organism is buried in a matrix of some mineral, over time, some of these pores get filled in. Some of these pores get filled in with mineral. Okay, are you with me so far? So we had a dead thing. The dead thing's tissues had pores in it, holes. The holes get filled in the holes get filled in with minerals. What do the holes get filled in with?
Minerals.
Where did those minerals come from?
Ground.
Yeah, the stuff it was buried by. And then, as all organisms do, everything dies, everything decays. The nature of all things is chaos and entropy. Okay, whatever. As all living things eventually do, the living material decays and it's gone forever. Okay, so this is the only way that we have evidence of things like the non-avian dinosaurs, because now we have this pretty neat little structure here where it was bone. Is it bone anymore?
No.
The bone is gone. But now it's replaced with, in the exact same shape of that bone, it's been replaced by minerals. So this is now a rock. It's a rock that is in the shape of a bone. And this rock, how long is that going to last? Nothing is forever. But until it melts, which could be millions, or until it erodes, which could be hundreds of thousands, but this will last, it's a rock. It will last a lot longer than the original bone. So this is where we get most of the fossils of really ancient organisms, like for instance the dinosaurs, or before them reptiles, or before them amphibians and fishes, is through permineralization, because it's a rock that is the shape of an organism. The organism has decayed a long time ago, less than 10,000 years after it died. But a rock in the shape of that organism sticks around. Okay, now we'll go back to mold and cast. A mold is when a little critter, a creature dies, and it falls in some soft sediment, it leaves a hole. And even after, the reason, I hope you're seeing a pattern, the reason this works is that soft sediment, oh, my sediment color was green. I'm sorry, Christmas colors, this is good. Sediment, and my little critter has died, and it makes a hole in the shape of its deadness in that sediment. Then even after the critter has decayed, which again, almost certainly less than 10,000 years after it dies, it will be gone forever. But it has left this hole in the sediment, which will become rock. And how long is this rock going to last? Again, depending on how long it takes to erode and weather, or depending on how long it takes to melt, it could be millions of years. It might not be, right? It could be 10 years, but it might be millions of years. And this, again, is a piece of rock, which is going to last a lot longer than the material that was there originally. So it came into the... Oh, who keeps betraying me? Someone keeps... Every time I touch this thing, something bad happens. So into some sediment has come these little holes. And if this hole gets filled in with some other kind of sediment, purple sediment this time, that purple sediment, right, this was the plaster of Paris in your lab, this purple sediment, right, the green was a hole in the shape of the organism, the purple, the new thing, the cast, this is the cast is in the original shape of the organism. And sometimes these are extremely detailed. So the hole that was the shape is the mold, the thing that is the same shape, the new sediment that's the same shape as the original organism, is called a cast. And sometimes these can be so detailed. I know there's I listened to a talk once at the Geological Society of America Summit when I went there 10 years ago, of these, I don't know what they were, like, were they some kind of fish? I can't remember, either a fish or a reptile that they had found that was more than 500 million years old, but they had very, very detailed, a cast that was so detailed. It was rock, right? So it's okay that it was 500 million years old, although that's rare too. But they had a cast that was so detailed that they could see the individual cells in the brain of this organism under the microscope. So sometimes these can be very, very, very detailed. You'll know from your plaster of Paris one, I wish someone had kept that, but even like the ridges of the shells were very well preserved, right? It looked very much like the original shell. Now let's talk about, these two are relatively easy. Original hard parts and original soft parts. That's just the same stuff as what the organism was, but still here. How can that happen? Well, some ways are tar pit, frozen, right? Amber. This one's especially good. One of the only ways that we know there were insects, for instance, during the Cretaceous or the Triassic before that, is because of amber. The amber is very good at preserving even the soft parts of organisms. What are some soft parts that organisms have? List them for me, or just give me some. You don't have to list all of them.
The wings.
Wings. What else? What other soft parts are there?
Skin.
Skin. What else? Organs. Eyes. Yeah. What are some hard parts? What hard parts do organisms have? Bones, teeth, claws, exoskeleton. Those things are, if it's the original hard parts, that is called an original hard part. If it's the original soft parts, that's called the original soft parts. And amber and frozen and tar are really the only ways that we get those. Carbonization is a little bit similar to cast in a mold, except instead of being a hole, maybe we've got, here's some sediment, and here's a dead, usually fish, and the dead, usually fish, falls out of the water, and its carbon, which living things are made out of carbon on planet Earth, leaks out into the sediment, and then even after the organism decays, the sediment is still stained with the carbon from the organism. Kind of like an ink blot. So these are the ways that organisms' remains can be preserved. So it's not always its actual remains, it's some evidence of its remains, okay? Now, there's another categorization. These are how they formed, but the other categorization is pretty simple, and it's just body or trace. If the fossil is a evidence of the actual body of the organism, which one of these do you think it is? Body, yeah. Evidence of, I'm going to write this fancy word, morphology. Morphology means its shape, how it actually was shaped. Morphology, morphos is the Greek word for shape, morphology is the study of shape. So it's the shape of the organism is evidenced by a body fossil. What do you think trace fossils evidence then? What? Go ahead.
A footprint.
Yep, a footprint is one. Evidence of its what? Footprint. What else? Not its actual body. Okay, it could be an impression of its foot. It could be an impression of a nest. It could be an impression of some eggs. It could be an impression of poop. I don't like that word. Feces, yes. It could be it could be some evidence of something it ate, right? Like it's, or a gastrolith, but not actually part of its body, so not organs, so not actually part of its body, but these are evidence of its behavior, which is actually in a lot of ways, this is way more useful and important to paleontologists, people who study ancient life, because how else are we going to find out the behaviors of, for instance, dinosaurs? And there are more fossils than just dinosaurs, but I keep using that because people are familiar with dinosaurs. But how else are we going to learn about how dinosaurs ate or pooped or nested or mated or walked? Because we can't see them, right? The very core, simple truth of paleontology is these guys are extinct, so how can we possibly learn about them? The answer is the evidence, fossils, evidence. We can't see them in real life, so we have to look at the evidence we do have, like body and trace fossils, yes?
You can also find out from the cavemen that drew on the walls. That drew on the walls.
It's okay, Teague. Ada.
You can make another Jurassic World or Jurassic Park thing, and then you can watch how they
Yeah, I bet. You know that's not true, right? Okay. So body and trace fossils are an important distinction, and I think, do we still have about 5 minutes left at least? Your book, I hope you found this to be enlightening, but your book had some really interesting case studies about individual and specific rock layers and the fossils that are contained within them. But do you, we're not done yet, we're going to move on to a different thing, but do you, for now, have questions about the ways that fossils are preserved, the types of fossils, or the principles of fossilization in general? Does anyone have any questions? Okay, I'm going to erase this very badly because this eraser is on its way out. Oof. Now, I said earlier that we would talk about this in a second, and it's been about 30 minutes, but I said earlier that we can't really use something called carbon-14 dating for fossils. It just doesn't work. Carbon-14 is a radioactive isotope that is preferentially incorporated into the bodies of living things. And that's like fancy science words to mean that as you breathe and are alive, and especially as you eat plants, or if you are a plant, as you photosynthesize, you get more carbon-14 in you than the world around you does at a certain known rate. And when you die, you're no longer alive. And when you die, you no longer preferentially incorporate carbon-14, and so we can very reliably, carbon-14 is radioactive, we can very reliably date how old a dead thing is, as long as it's more than 5,000 years old and less than 50,000 years old, we can date how long a dead thing has been dead. But most of what we're talking about with fossils are more than 50,000 years old. So what do we do then?
Do you have any carbon-14?
No, that's, yeah, in my body I do, but what do you mean by that, dude?
Like the radioactive?
Yeah, in my body I do. Like I say, all living things selectively incorporate carbon-14 into their bodies as they live.
I thought you might.
Yeah, you can probably get some, but that's not what we're talking about. The question is, how do we know how old things are if we can't carbon date them? And the answer is this. I have two things for you. One is called relative age dating, like when you see a cute girl at your family reunion. What? Like when you get it, like when you're dating your relatives. Did that actually happen to one of you? That makes I'm starting to blush because I said that. But that's obviously not what this actually means. That's just a little joke because you guys are hilarious. And then the other one we'll talk about is absolute age dating. Now listen, in the same way that this doesn't mean you're dating girls or boys, I don't know your life, at the family reunion, listen, in the same way that this doesn't mean you're dating people at your family reunion, this does not mean, I want you to listen to this very carefully, Trey, this doesn't mean that we're absolutely sure of it. People get that wrong on the test all the time. That's one of the options. It'll say, what's absolute age dating? And one of the choices is that we know the age of it. And that just isn't it. We do know the age, but we don't know it absolutely. So that's not what this means. What this means is a comparison of ages of what? Two things. Of what? What are some things that we would compare their ages with?
Another person?
Rocks. And what else are we talking about probably? Fossils. Good. So that's what relative age dating is. We'll come back to that. This one is a numerical age set to rocks. I'm going to leave out fossils because although some fossils can be carbon-14 dated, most fossils, they're too old. They're too old, so we can't use carbon-14 dating. That is, they're older than 50,000 years old. So this one is where we're comparing ages. The classic example of this is that if I say Isaiah is 14, 13, and 9 months, give me the answer right now. 13 years and 11 months old. 13 years and 10 months old, that's an absolute age. That's a numerical. What's the word numerical mean? Numbers. So if I say Isaiah is 13 years and 11 months old, that's an absolute age. If I say Isaiah is younger than Kylie, which I know because she just had a birthday, she turned 14. If I say Isaiah is younger than Kylie, that's a relative age date. You see it's comparing. Teague, I know you aren't listening because you're talking. If I'm comparing the ages of things, that's relative age dating. And if I say it's age in numbers, that's absolute age dating. For rocks, in relative age dating, we use primarily the law of superposition. You should write this down. Superposition is the principle that in a sequence of rocks, the oldest rocks are on the bottom. Old on the bottom. When things get laid down, unless they get flipped over, which does sometimes happen, but we know about that in other ways, like there's evidence that it has been flipped over. Unless it's been flipped over, the old stuff is on the bottom. Has anyone got a pile of laundry in their room? Are the oldest things, I hope it's clean laundry, are the oldest things that came out of the dryer on the bottom? Yeah, probably. If you just keep piling it up, the old stuff is on the bottom. If you're making a pizza and you want the crust to be on the bottom, because you're making a good pizza, what do you have to put on the countertop first? The crust. The crust has to go on the bottom. The oldest thing has to be on the bottom. That's a law of like not only geology and paleontology, but the universe. So the oldest rocks, basically, it's this. A is older than B is older than C is older than D, and D is older than E, right? In this layer, this sequence of rocks, in this layer of rocks, A is the oldest. So if I find a fossil of a swirly in A and a fossil of a star in D, are swirlies older or younger than stars? Older. Swirlies are older than stars. And I know that because I went and asked the swirly, how old are you? No, I can't do that. That doesn't work. It doesn't answer back. Or not with words anyway. You can't just ask. And you can't carbon-14 date it. That's a misconception. So all you can do is say, well, we know A is older than D, and we find swirly in A all over the world. That's an index fossil, that your book defines that. And so we know A's are older than D's, and we know swirlies are older than stars. That's how we date fossils. Now, where this comes in very handy is we can do a radiometric dating of rocks. A rock, when it first crystallizes, might have some radioactive material in it. That's these dots. Radioactive. 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 And over time, some of those dots, half of those dots, might become X's. That's the nature of radioactivity. I'm using simple symbols, but basically the parent isotope, in this case the dots, at a known rate that we can measure in a laboratory, that's very important, that we human beings can see how fast this is happening, the dots turn to X's. And so if we look at this rock and we say, well, half of the dots have become X's. So since this rock was molten, one half-life has passed. And in a lab, we can measure that half-life, indicated by the symbol lambda, to be, let's say, 500 million years, 500 megaannum. So if we find this rock, but we find it like this, we know that since the last time it was lava, 500 million years old have passed. And if we say that that's layer A, 500 million years old, wait, don't leave yet. How old is the swirly probably? If we can date this rock using this, how old is this swirly probably? About 500 million years old. How old is the star? Less. We don't know how much, but less. Bye.